So the sound insulation in your AdWag kit is going to be a product called Hushmat. This is what it looks like. It has an aluminum sheet in it, and so is therefore a little bit more dangerous than it looks, so I recommend gloves. Only tools you really need are a knife and a roller. And the objective here is to cover as much of the exterior sheet steel of the van with this product, because it will make a dramatic difference in how the van vibrates and transmits sounds when you're driving down the road or at a big festival. So this is the bang for the buck section here. We want to try to cover as much as possible. These ribs do have a bit of depth behind them, so you can try to ideally slide behind, get it as flat to the sheet steel as possible, cover as much of the sheet steel as possible. And for this one, for example, I'm just going to make my cut for where the edge of it is, peel back the backing, and we're going to get this one in. The smaller sections are going to be a little bit more tricky, but I'll show you how to do this in a minute. Okay, so again, we're just going to slide that in. Follow the line. You don't even need to go through the product all the way such that you'd be scoring your paint. And then just follow this curve down here. And then what I like to do is peel back one whole length of it, either the side or the top. Gloves are a little sticky, but again, they will keep you from getting cut by that aluminum sheet. So I think they're more good than bad. We're in. Get it all nice and smooth, and then just gently peel the backing paper out. And you can use your gloved hand to adhere it. The adhesive is super strong, quite tenacious. And then what I've been doing for the Transits is with this little strip, just stick it right down the middle, which is the area of greatest vibration. So now we've got, and of course if you have other scraps in going through your van, this would be where you'd want to just add thickness with any leftover Hushmat you have. Okay, next one going to be more of the same. Just going to come down here, follow my rib trace down. Peel back the starting zone. Like to just sort of fold it almost. Insert here. Where we get to this part. Here we've got a little spot where it didn't quite adhere fully, so this is where the roller tool comes in. I'm just going to try to make as much of this come into contact as possible. Right here you can see we've got spots that are going to be hard to compress, so what you can do is take your knife, add a little slit so that that spot can exhale out the air as you roll over. And then again, strap and go right down the middle. For these upper and lower, more curious shapes, the objective is the same. Cover as much of the exterior sheet steel with this product. I like to try to get in and get big pieces in there, for which I usually cut roughly to the size, fold in half, insert and unfold, but you can just as easily cut small convenient pieces, put them in there, get them adhered. You just add it up, going all the way down. In the rear half, you'll have to cut around some of the factory bracing that has adhesive adhering to it. Those areas aren't as critical because it's not as big an expanse. Any place the sheet steel has a bend to it or is in contact with other steel, like down here, it's not going to vibrate or be as tinny. This area is pretty loud, so I'm going to try to get a lot of sheets up there, and I'm probably just going to do it by cutting out some small ones for now and popping them in. Your van goes up pretty far, like you can see where my fingers are. That's about how far we want to try to get this piece up there. So I'm just going to sneak this piece in, get it as far as I can up there. Set the top, and then walk it down. So I've covered that much, and then I'll just keep moving down the sides with more pieces of about the same size. It works out nicely because this dimension of your hush mat is about the right size. If you just cut these up into thirds, you should be able to get in there and get them all applied. So hush mat is also excellent for adhering and securing bundles of wire or even single pieces of wire to make sure that they don't run the risk of shorting by vibrating against other pieces of structure and also making noise while you're driving. So I'm going to take this piece and use it to secure this one. For this one, I'm going to create a seam along the bottom, snug it up tight, get the bottom onto the van, and then just walk it up into this bundle in a way that I capture the bundle and then wrap inside around, get it up on the ceiling, and then just push in to complete that capture. You can also use it any place that wire passes around a potentially sharp angle. Just take a little piece of hush mat, wrap it around, and it'll protect the inside, or you can also use it to capture that same. So for this detail, I've cut 2 little squares of hush mat. I'm going to use the first to create edge protection right here. Roll around behind it, come around the front side, and then I'll use the second one to eliminate the possibility that there's going to be chafing here by literally just wrapping that one around, capturing it. So you can do that any place you find a wire that's passing by factory steel that has a sharp edge to it. Okay, the ceiling is another place where you want to put as much hush mat as you can, especially those sections that are large and open. This has these reinforced sections, so it's not going to be as loud as if it wasn't there, but this is prime real estate to cover with hush mat. Pieces can overlap. I just take full sheets, peel back to the beginning, sight my line that I want to hit, get it started, and just walk it out this way. Work it around the factory shapes and contours with your fingers, and then back it up with your roller, especially right near those shapes. You can get it really pretty tight there. So your greatest benefit with the hush mat is certainly going to be ceilings and these big window cutouts. And then up above the door rail and above the big window here, tinny spots. The door does benefit from it as well. It's a little bit more complex, almost like a little bit of arts and crafts where you have to get in and cut some smaller pieces. You can use scissors on this product. So take your time, make a bunch of small pieces that you see, address the tinny sound. Feel free to use your knuckles and thump on the metal, add some hush mat and see if it sounds better.
Okay, so we've gotten our hush mat done. Time to move on to insulation. So in the kit is a pre-cut insulation kit. So it's 3/8 insulate. All the shapes for each of the voids are pre-cut. And there's kind of a cheat sheet, I guess you could call it, or several cheat sheets that come in the insulation kit with some sort of codes and dimensions of each shape. So I just want to sort of tell you how to decipher that. So this is the driver's side aft kind of mid bay, we'll call it. So this is where you could put a window if you were going to do that. But here's the sheet one of the sheets that will come in the kit, and each piece of insulation is going to have a corresponding label stuck to it that will have that code right here. So right now we're looking at driver's side, so that's the D. Mid, meaning it's not the low part of the wall, it's the mid part of the wall. This would be the high. All right, and 2 for bay number 2. Front one is 1, this one's 2, and A meaning it's the first layer, so the layer that goes on the skin of the van, and then you can actually do 2 layers of insulation here. So mid layer B, so 2B would be the one that's further inboard here. In this particular van, we're only going to do 1 layer in this section because this van is going to be spec'd out with our optional window pocket, which is a thermoform piece of paneling that comes off the wall here and recesses into this window a little bit. So if you had 2 layers of insulation, you'd actually be compressing the insulation with that, which you know, defeats the purpose. So, but if you had one, if you just had a flat panel coming across here, you can see this window void is quite deep by about that much. So that's plenty of room for 2 layers of insulation. So that's where drivers mid bay 2B would come into play, and it's just barely bigger around because as you move outboard, the window pocket gets slightly bigger. So just follow that logic basically for the rest of the van. Low is going to be all the low bays, the lower numbers, you know, so 1 would start at the very front and then move back in succession to the back of the van, and then high starts up here, and then the ceilings will be labeled just like that as well. As for the doors, there's a lot going on behind the scenes of these factory panels here. So there's a speaker here. Depending on how the van's spec'd out, there can be a lot of stuff going on. So we do include some insulation for the lower part of the rear doors as well as the lower part of the slider door. But it's not a specific shape, and it's labeled door. You know, they'll be labeled with the word door in them, rear door or slider door. But it's basically just a piece of insulation that you can cut up and stick back here if you choose to do that. Some people, honestly, some people don't even want to bother taking off this panel and doing that, but you can if you want, and you'll have insulation to use if you do that. Okay, in the kit with your insulation, you're going to have a roll of this double stick tape. This is a really good tape for this application because it's really temperature resistant. It'll stay sticky even in really cold temperatures, which is good. And it's thin. It's not stinky like the spray adhesive, so it's just a nice way to do this. But you can really easily rip it. You don't need scissors or anything. And we're just going to basically put a couple 4 or 5 strips in here just to hold up the insulation. You know, the wall pocket will help hold it up, but over time, if you don't have something sticking it to the van, it can start to just kind of slough down and then leave a void up top. So you can just basically do a quick little measurement here, and it doesn't need to be perfect. Leave the brown backing on it for now, and then stick it to the wall here over the hush mat. If you overlap onto the paint, that's really not that big of a deal. I kind of messed up and put a crease in it. Not a huge deal, but avoid the creases because it makes the backing harder to peel off, and sometimes it'll rip when you try to do that. So we're going to do 1 in each little flat area to hold the insulation up. And then the hardest part about this is just grabbing the backing. So what I do is pick the corner that I'm going to use, and I really jam that corner in, make sure it's stuck on the back side, and then that way the backing comes off of the corner much more easily. Like that, grab it, pull it down, and then when you're getting ready to stick the insulation up, you just kind of, press it onto the tape, and then you're good to go. Now we're only doing 1 layer here, remember. If you're doing 2 layers, one easy way to do it is actually stick the 2 pieces of insulation together first. So put a piece of piece of tape on 1 layer, peel the backing off, lay the next layer down, and then put the whole thing up and press it. So these upper areas are a little bit different. You don't need as much of the tape up here. It's kind of boxed in nicely. In between these, there's a big void behind this that you can fit insulation. So the numbering system is going to go, this would be whatever, 3 would be the open void, and then 3.5 would be this void. So anytime you see 0.5 on the labeling, it's going to be these small bays in between. There's going to be 2 layers up here. Sometimes it's easier to stick the 2 layers, especially for these small pieces, tuck them in there, and you can just do a little bit of the tape up top just to keep the top from sloughing down. But mostly because they're small pieces, they're gonna stay in place. And then these areas right here, you're going to, they're going to be long strips and doubled up as well. You can tape them together, and then you can basically feed them in one end and kind of work through until it's all in this kind of void back here. Okay, for the sealing, it's pretty straightforward, but it's a little bit of a different process. You definitely want to be using the tape up here, of course. So you don't want to skimp on the tape up here. Make sure there's plenty of adhesive to get it up there. Where the shapes are going to be one long piece that spans the width of the ceiling in between the ribs. So the bays, we'll call them bays, in between ribs are going to be numbered accordingly, front to back, starting with 1 and 7 at the back or whatever it is. The way you handle the insulation going over the speed struts, there's a few different ways you can do it. You can tuck, start in the middle, work outward, tuck the end of the insulation up over the speed strut and then out to the edge. You can actually, when you get here, you can cut it into a separate section and put it on the other side of the speed strut. And then a third way it can be done is basically cutting a 2-inch strip out of that particular section, resting it inside this speed strut here, so the insulation stays lofted, and then continue on with your offcut on the outside. You can handle it the way that you want, and you'll see how we do it here. All right, one thing to remember before you start with the insulation is to get back into all of the voids of the walls. We've been drilling and cutting holes and things like that. So we want to clean out those areas so we don't trap everything in with the insulation. So get yourself an air hose, whatever you need to do, vacuum, and just do a good thorough job of trying to blow that stuff out of there and then vacuum it out. Okay, so now we're gonna go in with a little bit of insulation on the ceiling. I just wanted to show you guys the label. Pretty simple. It says C3. All right, so ceiling bay number 3. So behind rib number 2. So we're working right in here. Steve's going through with the tape right now. So he's gonna do some pretty good long strips on the outer sides here. Probably, at least 3 in the middle. Another one out here. All right, and so to handle the ceiling, we're gonna keep it in one piece and we're gonna tuck it up over the ceiling ribs. One thing to note is don't get your tape too close to the ceiling rib, because when you try to tuck it under here, the tape's gonna grab on to the insulation, and it's gonna be hard to stuff it through. So keep this bit of tape where you're feeding it through, kind of away from the speed strut, I mean. And what I did was I basically folded it in half, I guess hamburger style, and we're gonna put it up, starting in the middle in this particular bay. Work our way outward in both directions. Get it up over the shelves of these, rib or the center ceiling support brackets and stuff, and then just kind of take the end. I kind of take one corner and stuff it through on a diagonal until I can grab the other side. Make sure both sides of the insulation are through, not just one side, because if you grab one side, meaning one of the black layer, just one of the black layers, you'll peel the insulation apart a little bit, which is kind of a pain in the butt. Not a huge deal. And I should be practicing what I preach and have eye protection on, because this stuff will kind of fluff off a little bit, and it's kind of annoying if it gets in your eyes. All the way to the edge here. Tuck it up into the corners. Going to show you a quick little demo of what I talked about earlier, feeding 2 layers of thin strips of insulation into this void here. So I doubled up the layers, kind of folded them like a taco, and I'm just going to sort of progressively feed it through like this. If it gets bunched up, it gets harder to feed through, so make sure you're kind of keeping an eye on where it's going and try to grab it with the other hand if you can. It can be kind of tricky, honestly, but once you go through a couple repetitions, it gets a little bit easier. And if you need to pull it out a bit and restart, not a big deal. So here's another trick that we're working with here, and we actually fished a piece of webbing through here, attach it to the end of this to pull through. So sometimes you can just feed it from one end and it starts to pull through nicely. Other times it takes a dive and goes into a void where you can't grab it and pull it the rest of the way. So just wanted to show you a few tricks. Something stiff, a little stiffer than the strap, sometimes works better because you can more easily feed it through where it needs to attach on the other end. So wire, you know, like coat hanger type of thing would work well too. Sausage. Okay, so last little bit of insulation here. I want to talk about the rear door. So we need to pull off this factory plastic panel, which we didn't do during the prep of the van. It's pretty straightforward, but you just want to be kind of careful for two reasons. You don't want to break the plastic clips if you can help it, and you also don't want to cut up your hands, which I've already done. And so getting another plastic panel tool to sort of get it started is helpful, and just kind of until you feel that first one pop in the corner, and you can go any one of the corners to start. And then once you get a few popped off, kind of look back there to see where the next one is. You don't want to pull all the way from the top corner when you know it's all attached down here, because then it can kind of torque the plastic and you can break stuff. So just kind of see where they're at, work your way down. There's one in the middle down there. All right, and then at the bottom here, there's white clips and there's plastic, or sorry, there's white clips and there's green clips. Okay, so, oops, you can see the clips in here. Sometimes they pop out of their little slots like that. It's no big deal. Just make sure if they drop, you find where they are, because you're going to end up reusing them. And then you can just set this aside for now, and I'll show you what the insulation looks like. Thanks. And basically for the rear doors, because there can be some complex shapes and different things kind of going on behind the scenes here, depending on how your van is spec'd, we basically just give you a big sheet for each one of the rear doors, and you can cut it up as necessary to get the shapes that you need. And don't forget, we're also going to hushmat the back doors and the inside of the slider door as well. So before you put the insulation in, stick some hushmat in there as well. And basically for the rear doors, because there can be some complex shapes and different things kind of going on behind the scenes here, depending on how your van is spec'd, we basically just give you a big sheet for each one of the rear doors, and you can cut it up as necessary to get the shapes that you need to fill the voids back here. But you can pull back this plastic thing. It's just some kind of tar type adhesive here that you can stick it back on with and peel it back. So you can see there's some speaker cutouts. If the rear door has wipers, for instance, there might be a wiper motor in here and some different connections and things like that. This one's a pretty straightforward, simple kind of void, but there's some structure and stuff to work around. So just cut up the insulation as you see fit. You might use some of the tape in here as well, and then finish up the rear doors for insulation. Slap the plastic back on, and then the panel goes back on as well. Same thing for insulation with the slider door. If you remember, this panel was just a simple kind of flat corrugated plastic panel that we are going to replace with one of our panels from the kit. But then you can just pull out this plastic. You can see there's a little bit more going on the inside of the slider door. So same kind of approach. We gave you just a big kind of rectangle of insulation, and you can cut it up as you see fit to get back into these little voids. And then we're going to end up drilling out some of these factory holes and replacing them with rivnuts to capture the panel that replaces this panel as part of the kit. Okay, so for setting the rivnuts in the slider door, it's basically we're going around the perimeter of the slider door to the slider door panel to any one of the holes that's basically almost as big as our 25/64 bit for the rivnut. So kind of up over this side and then down, except for the very bottom where there's some plastic inserts. You can reuse the hardware that came with your van for that panel if you have it, or we've got some just black kind of machine head screws, self-tapping screws that can go in the bottom there as well. So drill out for all the rivnuts in those holes, use your primer, your sealant, set a rivnut, and then it'll be ready for the panel. Then you can go in and do your hushmat and insulation.